Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to this, thank God it's Friday, Get Together live session. My name is Henrik. I'm the Science and Technology Managing Editor at getAbstract, and I'm glad you found the time to join us on today's topic, stress less. Before we get to our guest today, here's a little reminder of what you tuned into. These Get Together live sessions are hosted by getAbstract, the world's leading company when it comes to providing you with compressed knowledge. Our mission is to find, rate, compress, curate knowledge from trusted sources to empower you to make better decisions in your personal and professional life. The specific idea of our Get Together series is a read together and talk about the most important topics of the day from home office to home office under lockdown, and to provide, in this particularly way, some first-hand tips each of us may need to cope with the current corona crisis. To take part in the discussion, join the live stream on Vimeo or Facebook or YouTube or on all those platforms, whichever is suited for you. And you can place your comments there. And in the second half of our session, we will try to answer your Koni Gebistorf, our executive editor at getAbstract, will try to answer your questions. Are we ready to go? So
we are. I think so. Finally.
So I'm very glad you took the time today to join us in our Get Together session and will be our guest today. This current lockdown situation that we are all dealing with is, it's a keyword here, right? Koni, welcome. You're with getAbstract for a couple of years now as an executive editor at our English editorial. And it's our responsibility to make sure our library is up to date and useful. You've covered the financial crisis in 2008. You have witnessed trade wars come and go. You have seen the massive shifts in digitization over the past years, but nothing changed the circumstances of our lives as quickly and as significant as the current crisis. That alone might boost your stress level to a new height, I guess, but dealing with the situation yourself and providing new insights for our customers, that should be particularly exhausting. So, but you're a father of a young daughter and share your home office with her and your wife, which might add even more to the stress level. How stressed are you? Does the situation bake your stress-o-meter already, or is it still okay?
Well, it's a good question. Thanks, Hendrik, for the introduction. It's a good question to ask now because we were struggling with technology actually before we could get onto this chat. And our host, who was supposed to lead it, Michael, our good friend and host, couldn't make it for technical reasons. It's not his fault. Thanks much for stepping in, Hendrik. Thanks for having me. And yes, of course, in these circumstances, I am a little stressed, as you probably are too, because you only knew 5 minutes ago that you should run these sessions. Yeah, so I am a bit stressed. And of course, the whole situation with us having to stay at home is stressful, and mainly because it's something new. Our brains do like routines, and as soon as we can't follow these routines anymore, as soon as everything changes, we just need time to adapt to that. And whatever is new, this is totally normal. Will stress us more than the things we are used to do on day by day. But if you're asking me whether I'm particularly stressed, I would probably answer that with a quote from a Beatles song that you will know. It's getting better all the time.
That's great. And if you're stressed, what do you do about it? So how do you deal with it? Can you quickly share your best tips for coping with stress in this particular situation? If there anything you could share?
Yeah, I do have one. I have one thing in particular that I've learned over the last 2 weeks or so working from home, which has proved to be extremely helpful. And the idea for that is basically to try and own your day. What do I mean by that? What I do, and this may sound silly, but I'm trying to with the goal of getting a grip on my schedule, I try to schedule meetings with myself. This may sound silly, but what it is, or what it means is, we're all used to scheduling meetings with other people, and if we have something planned, we feel obliged to participate, and can't afford to miss it. And what I've been trying is to do the same thing with parts of my job that I have to do, that are important, but that I'm doing on my own. So let's say if I need an hour to go through email, to give you a very simple example, I will schedule that hour ideally at the beginning of the week already, so I know exactly when I will do it, and then I really try to force myself to stick to it. And this reduces. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask: do you switch off your phone or put it in the flight mode, and or quit everything else to just be able to focus on this one task that you want to do, or how do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Everything, like remove everything you can from your desk, switch off your phone or put it on mute, do everything, like get away from everything that might potentially distract you, because distraction is much underrated when it comes to the things that cause stress. I would say it's even, especially in an internet age where you're always just one click away from the next interesting thing, or the next job you would have to do, or the next email that's popping up. All these things tend to distract us and are a major source for stress. And if you try and schedule your day in a way that you say, okay, from then to then, I'll do that. After that, I'll have a break. Then I'll do this. Then I'll do that. Then I'll have lunch. Then I'll do this, and so on. And then really stick to it. That, in my experience, reduces stress enormously. It has a huge effect, positive effect.
Okay. And this reminds me a little on the session, on yesterday's session with the author Kevin Kruse, who also I think had a different view on this, very similar view on this, like you just described. And he mentioned something else. He mentioned that he tries to have rituals to get into the working day, and rituals to get out of the working day. And I found that interesting as well. He said normally he would be commuting to the office and then going home, and these are times where you naturally get into the mood, into working mode, so to say, and then you have a chance to get out of that and get back into your family life. And with the current situation where people are at home, this may no longer be the case. How do you deal with this?
It's very important. I totally agree with Kevin Kruse there, and it's very important. And so does Ian Robertson, by the way, the author of the book that we've chosen for today's session. It's super important that you keep that separation between your work and your private life, even now that you have to work from home. And that doesn't mean that you can't do some work over the weekend if you need to. That's not necessarily a problem. But if you do, you have to schedule, like I've said before, you have to schedule a certain time, and then during that time do your work, and then go back to whatever else you have planned for the weekend. And maybe one other thing, since you mentioned going to work and coming back from work, which all of which isn't possible at the moment. You're always at work, kind of, at least physically or geographically speaking. But what you can do, and what I would advise everybody to do, especially it's Friday today, on a Friday night, so we have the weekend before us. The last thing you schedule on your working day shouldn't be something that has the potential for like a huge stress factor. For instance, I wouldn't go through new email as the last thing of your workday, because there's a real danger that you'll discover some requests, messages that might just stress you throughout the whole weekend. So it's better to reserve that last hour or so of your workday, not just on Fridays, but on any workday, for something that I'm on top of things there. I know exactly what to do. I know how to do it. I'll just do it. And that will make the transition from work to your private life a smoother one.
Yeah. And you already mentioned it. For today, you picked one of the most popular new book summaries from our library, The Stress Test by Ian Robertson. And of course, there are hundreds of stress management books in our library, which are like all the other 22,000 summaries available for free at this moment. So if you're still looking for good advice on how to spend and manage your time, sign up and read. And why did you choose this particular book, Koni?
Well, Ian Robertson the author is an interesting case in that he is both a psychologist and a neuroscientist. So he started out as a clinical psychologist, and later, like you, by the way, also a neuroscientist, he went into he started doing brain research, and he calls this the hardware, that would be the brain, and the software, which is the psychology. And what is interesting in his book is that he says that the software, our psychology, can actually influence the brain and influence the way that we perceive and deal with stress. So it's not all set. We all feel stress. And stress isn't necessarily, Robertson says, it's not necessarily a good or a bad thing. Intrinsically, it can be both. And what matters a lot, and people seem to underestimate that, is how you frame a stressful situation. If you view it as a problem, it will stress you much more, and it will give you a negative, you'll have a negative experience, a much more negative experience than if you don't see it as a problem, but as a challenge to overcome. If you go into that naturally, inevitably stressful situation with the mindset of bring it on, I'm here, I'm ready, I can do that, that leads to much better outcomes. He actually, if I may mention that, he actually has an example of math students who were asked, he did this experiment with math students who were asked to solve problems in front of an audience. And all of these math students had the same level of expertise. They were all equally good at math. But he separated them in two camps. And one camp was the anxious camp, that were the students that naturally, by nature, just feel more anxious about having to present something in front of an audience. And the other camp felt more comfortable doing that. And the outcome was that even though they were all equally good at what they had to do, the group that isn't easily stressed by presenting in front of an audience did much better at actually solving the math problems. So this shows that how we frame a situation has a huge impact on how well we are prepared to deal with it.
Do you think this kind of blocks us from then acting? Like if we are afraid, if we don't see the forest for the trees, we have all this in front of us, is all this big, huge mass of things that make us afraid that we have trouble getting it done, and that it's a kind of a mindset question whether how we approach it.
It's totally a mindset question. What I have experienced, what helps in such situations, and I did that just 5 minutes ago because it was a stressful situation with this whole live session not working, the technology not working. So that was a stressful situation, and what I have tried, and so I would say successfully tried to do in such situations, is imagine yourself in a year from now. Ask yourself, will this situation be something that I will worry about in 1 year's time? Is this something that I will look back to and feel horribly about? Or is it something that I will laugh about? Or much more likely still, something that I will completely have forgotten about? And in most cases, the last thing is what's the case. And so if you once you realize that whatever stressful thing might happen is not going to change the course of your life, once you realize that, you're much more relaxed. And when you are relaxed, again, I'm referring to these math students, the example that we had before, you're much more likely to perform on a higher level.
So this sounds almost philosophical. And Robertson also quotes the famous German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche, and he was actually more of a philosophical poet. And in his famous sentences, "What doesn't kill you will make you stronger." So when Robertson wants to illustrate, what he wants to illustrate is we can gain some control over our emotions by the way we label them in our minds. Would you agree
this is exactly what he means, and this is exactly what we just talked about. And maybe I do have a story that I maybe can tell. It's a brutal story, I have to warn you. It's not funny at all, and but it is a very good example of what he talks about. And the story goes as follows. I had a friend at high school who suffering from depression for years. And we all knew that, and we were at the party on a Friday or Saturday night, and next to the club where that party happened was a train tunnel, and he decided at some point late at night to run out and throw himself in front of that train. And he did that and survived the accident and lost both of his legs. So it's about as horrible as you could possibly imagine. Now, the reason why I'm telling this horrible story is that after that accident, he was obviously in hospital for the longest time. And when he left the hospital and came back to school in a wheelchair, everybody noticed, and it was obvious that he had left this whole problem of depression, of clinical depression, behind himself. So he was a totally different human being from that moment on, and was able, as far as I know, and I've heard that from a couple of colleagues who are still in contact with him. I'm not, but I've heard that from other people. He is really his life changed dramatically to the positive after that horrible event. And this just shows that once you change your perspective on something, that can make all the difference. So it's not coming back to much less dramatic stressful situations. It's not a given how stressful and how negatively something will affect you. We can manage that if we, as Robertson describes it in his book, if we try and frame the situation in a positive way.
So thanks for sharing this story. This is really it really gets to me. But still, it kind of shows that it's not only the external circumstances that then define the outcome, but it is really also how we deal with it, how we look at it, how we approach a situation that seems to have a great influence on how it actually works out, right?
Yes, what is always worth doing is, and he also talks about that, Robertson, in his book, what is always worth doing is prepare for what's to come. And that brings me back to the thing that we talked about first, scheduling your day, scheduling your week, arranging certain times and to do what you plan to do, because that gives you a sense of ownership and of having control over what happens. And that alone, just that emotion alone of being in control can be a huge relief, and will lead to a less stressful experience, and thus to a better performance, no matter what you do.
Okay. And I think you mentioned that you're a daydreamer. What has that to do with all of that? Where's the connection?
Yeah, there's a Robertson talks in his book about daydreamers, and I'm one of them. I always, at school, our high school or primary school teacher actually used to throw a wet rag, the rag that he used to clean the blackboard. He used to throw that at me because I was somewhere else dreaming or thinking about whatever.
And
just
there's
not what
also
the
always
things
this
that.
one teacher that throws stuff at you, right? I mean, at any school.
Well, he didn't, he meant well, and I'm actually glad he did. Otherwise I would have probably missed quite a bit at school. But Robertson talks about that type of person, daydreamers, and or people are prone to that. And he says that these kind of people, they tend to dwell on negative things much more often than on positive things. So if our mind is drifting, there's every likelihood that we will get anxious and think about stuff that has the potential to stress us. So there again, in order to avoid that, if you're prone to that, in order to avoid it, it helps if you, before you do something, if you clearly state to yourself, okay, so the next hour I'm going to do this and I'm going to focus on that, and try and not drift away and really focus on what you're doing. And this is true for both your work, but it's also true for everything you do privately. So I'll really try to, in an hour from now, I know that my job will be to prepare dinner for the family, and I'll try and focus on that. And once I know, because I know that already, I'm not stressed by any email that might come in at that point, because I know I won't look at it. I won't deal with it. I'll be in the kitchen cooking.
Very good. So maybe I see there are some questions incoming. We also want to engage our viewers a little and see what they have to, what kind of questions they have. But maybe, is there anything that you think is a critical takeaway for remote leaders in our lockdown situations with respect to the stress, or like Robertson also talked about the level of stress that is right, and yeah.
For remote lead, you mean for managers in particular? Yes, because I think what matters, we are all aware of our own stress levels. Obviously, everybody knows how stressed they are. But what you don't necessarily realize or know, if you have to work remotely and you can't see your colleagues and your team members, is how they feel. And we all schedule meetings now online to discuss this and that and get the things done that we need to get done to work. But I would say that it also matters that every now and then you call someone without a specific work-related topic in mind, just to see how they're doing, whether they have whether they face problems that you could help solving, or just to chat, just to have a coffee, so to say, with them, because that will give you an impression on how they're doing, and on how stressed they are. Coffee doesn't help, by the way, when it comes to stress. That's also something that Robertson mentions. So maybe make it something else, but that helps you to understand how stressed your colleagues might be, which is something that you don't naturally realize if you only interact online.
Okay. May I read you one of the questions that came in from Facebook from Lorana? She says, a great conversation, thank you. It's easy to say not to stress, but in the moment it's often hard to stay level-headed. What is your favorite way to de-stress and stay calm?
I don't have a clear recipe for that, and it's probably everybody has their own little tricks on how to deal with that. The one thing that I've said this before, but maybe I'll just repeat it because I really do think it works. If you try and picture yourself in a year from now, what seems stressful now looks like a joke or a piece of cake by then.
And that gives you
really,
comfort
in my experience, that exactly. Just realize that this is not the end of the world. It's not even the end of the day. just relax and if necessary, laugh about it. But I think that helps tremendously. It's also, there's a good example in Robertson's book where he proves that people who had a very stressful, public speakers who had a very stressful experience speaking to an audience, and were super nervous, and after the event said or felt that this was one of the most horrible things they ever had to do or they ever experienced, that actually often, or in most cases, the audience didn't even notice. And that's also something that is worth telling yourself. I might be super stressed now, but to the audience or the people who are listening, or to other people, that may just not be a big deal. So it's not worth my stress.
Okay, yeah. And I have another question for actually from Michael coming in, and he says, so coping with stress is not only about the circumstances, so it's as well about how you decode them. And Robertson is also very clear about the right level of stress. To a certain context, to a certain extent, we can cope with it, handle it, make it productive. But after a certain threshold, then it quickly becomes critical in terms of our mental health, and then it can cause real trouble. So it seems to be a question of balance.
Yes, yeah. There's actually, he cites something that is called the Yerkes-Dodson law, named after the researchers who found that who found that it's not just stress isn't intrinsically bad or good. It's all about the level. I seem to remember that my Latin teacher used to say it's the dose that makes the poison. So a little stress is good because it activates your brain, and it's necessary. And that's why we all feel it. It's something that we need for survival. If the tiger is outside your cave and you're not stressed, you'll be dead in 5 minutes. So you better be stressed. So a certain level of stress is a positive thing, but it gets to a point where it hampers, where your performance deteriorates because of it. So the best thing to do is try and keep that balance, and frame the stress, frame the situation positively, like we talked about that before. And if you frame it positively, if you label it the right way, if you see it as a challenge rather than a problem, that will make that stress a potentially positive thing that activates your brain and pushes you forward to deliver your best possible performance.
And I think what also matters a lot is if it's a stressful situation that happens now and then it's gone, like this one. Now when we when we're done with that, then we can relax again. Or whether it's like this chronic type of stress that always comes up, where you're in a situation where a certain type of stress shows up regularly and really gets to you in the long term. That is an entirely different
absolutely
challenge.
And one thing to do against that again is if you allow yourself to be distracted all the time, and as we said before, this is easier to happen than in any other time. We're constantly online. Everything's just a click away. We could do this, we could do that, we could do that. Somebody wants this, somebody wants that. If you let yourself be distracted by that, you're quite likely to eventually suffer from this. This will turn into a chronic thing, as opposed to if you try and take control of it, schedule your day, own your day, define yourself what you will do when. That is a huge relief.
Okay, I think we have all homework to do. Try to work on our mindset and think positive and get control of our days, and maybe reflect on how we'll see this day in 1 year. Thank you so much, Koni. That was a pleasure talking to you. Thank you for the viewers for submitting the questions. We'll be here again on Monday with our next at getTogether session. You can see the schedule on our journal page where we publish the week's get-together session schedule, and where you can also already download the book summaries or the other type of content that we discuss about that we discuss during our sessions. So I wish you a very nice weekend, everybody. Thanks for tuning in, and thank you, Koni.
Thank you very much for listening and for stepping in, Hendrik. Take care and have a great weekend.
It was a pleasure. Same to you.
Extraordinary challenges require extraordinary responses from thought leaders, company executives, and employees. As the coronavirus pandemic unfolds and businesses scramble to adapt to escalating containment efforts, getAbstract is here to help organizations navigate this crisis wisely and professionally. For over 20 years, we've been committed to providing relevant knowledge from reliable sources to help people make better decisions in their personal and professional lives. In line with our mission to empower decision makers with relevant knowledge from trusted sources, we are proud to offer businesses free access to our full library until May 18. Embark on a no-strings-attached knowledge journey with getAbstract. Sign up today.